Fox 45 is on weather alert. We're bringing you team coverage on Tropical Storm Ophelia's impact from Ocean City to right here in Baltimore. The juvenile crime crisis touching schools across the region, while a Baltimore City Schools police sergeant said guns are too available for young people. And later, we're hearing from a local sheriff who's calling on Governor Wes Moore to do more when it comes to curbing juvenile crime.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
And Fox 45 News is on a weather alert tonight as we continue to track Tropical Storm Ophelia moving up the East Coast. The storm making landfall earlier this morning near Emerald Isle, North Carolina. Here in Baltimore, we didn't see much impact with some on and off showers and wind throughout the day. But as you can see on the bottom of your screen, North Carolina, Virginia, and even Delaware felt the worst of it, with streets left flooded and heavy winds knocking down trees. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Vincent Hill. Our team of reporters have been keeping track of Ophelia all day, monitoring conditions in Ocean City. And closer to home, we'll have their reports in just a few minutes. But let's get to meteorologist Wyatt Everhart with the latest on the storm's path and a look at the parts of the state hit the hardest. Wyatt.
Yeah, it was one of the situations where points south of us certainly got hit harder. No question about that. But there's still time to go here. We are not done yet with Ophelia. Heavy rain and flood concerns down toward Richmond. That cluster of heavy rain moving north. Now, this is a tropical depression now, no longer a tropical storm, but it's still packing all that heavy rain, all that tremendous moisture. And we still have some concerns, waterfront areas. One more high tide cycle tonight to get through. Points like Annapolis, Kent Island, points along the bay have to watch for that, as well as the lower eastern shore. So watching for those heavy rains. The high winds today did get up there. Gust of 45 in La Plata, southern Maryland, places down toward St. Mary's County certainly got the highest impacts with the wind, and also the coast, places like Ocean City. The rest of this evening for Baltimore, it's all about more on and off downpours. We'll have to watch for some ponding of water in low-lying areas. Otherwise, though, I think we'll continue to see slow improvement through your Sunday. We talk more about that and a fall-like outlook straight ahead.
All right, Wyatt, thank you. Fox 45 Olivia Dance continues our team coverage with a look at the conditions down in Ocean City earlier today and the long-term impacts of the storm.
The ocean's very angry. We're looking at 10 to 12 foot waves.
The bands from Tropical Storm Ophelia smashing through Ocean City.
We were waiting out the night. We knew if it was going to get bad, we were definitely going to try to get out of here as fast as possible.
Bringing a storm surge, high winds, and rain overnight.
A lot of wind. I mean, it took a lot of them trees there bending over and everything. But last night the rain started out, so I go to bed early. So I didn't get to see the rain until I got up this morning, and then I was watching the waves.
Those visiting the beach for the last weekend of summer woke up to stormy conditions on Saturday, too.
At 3 a.m. I woke up and it was really windy. The rain was going, and I looked out here and it wasn't flooded yet, so I'm not sure when that happened.
At the end of Ocean City here at Inlet Park, we came across some flooding. The head groundsman at the hotel here says that he's already pumped over 100 gallons out. Now, at one point, this flooding was over a foot deep. Of course, the concern is that this will just get worse as the bands of this storm continue to roll through.
We'll be doing some sandbags, and then, like I said before, I'm gonna keep this pump running, and we're gonna make sure that everything is out the way so no debris will be flying, just in case the winds pick up again.
The mayor of Ocean City says flooding and beach erosion are the biggest concerns.
Probably anticipating we're going to experience some beach erosion, but the dunes and the beach are in great shape. You know, they're there to protect the properties, and they're going to do that.
And after the storm passes, it's time for cleanup ahead of the big Oceans Calling Music Festival, scheduled to be on the beach next weekend.
It'll be all hands on deck. Ocean City will be out cleaning the sand off the boardwalk and doing all they can to assist, you know, along the beach and with whatever equipment we have.
But as for this weekend,
the wind's probably been the worst part.
Yeah.
But we're diehard fishermen.
Despite the storm, the boardwalk was buzzing and some braving the beach.
We're hoping that it gets a little better so we can get to the beach. If not, I promise them girls we still make a sandcastle. Like
Paul Gordon, visiting from Pennsylvania with his granddaughters, Ophelia won't stop him from keeping his promise.
We're making a sandcastle one way or another. When I promise a kid something, I don't go back on it.
Reporting in Ocean City, I'm Olivia Dance, Fox 45 News.
And our viewer Tom sent us these pictures and video from Ocean City this morning. You can see what looks like some rough, choppy waters with clouds hanging over the sky. These were taken just 2 hours after Ophelia made landfall down in North Carolina. Now, if you want to send pictures or video from Ophelia, Fox 45 wants to see it. We want to see how the storm has impacted your community. To share your pictures and videos with us, scan that QR code right there on your screen or head to foxbaltimore.com/chime-in. Here in Baltimore, Ophelia caused some rain and gusts of wind. Fox 45's Alexa Ashwell continues our team coverage as she heads down to Fells Point for a look at the impact.
The effects of Tropical Storm Ophelia felt across the greater Baltimore region. In downtown Annapolis, the water rising, parking lots flooded near the Annapolis Maritime Museum, and the wind rocking boats docked at the harbor. Farther north and inland, a similar scene. All eyes were on the sky in Baltimore's Fells Point.
The sky's not that dark.
Businesses and residents had already prepped for the storm, filling bags with sand provided by the city to stop any potential floodwaters. The rain not stopping visitors. People instead braving the wind and showers with umbrellas and raincoats.
Calming, it's fantastic. Great time to go on a walk, great time to read a book.
And being extra careful when walking across the historic neighborhood's cobblestone.
I think these roads are not the best to drive on in the rain.
The wind also causing hazardous driving conditions. This tree falling across Northern Parkway in the city, a potential hazard our team of meteorologists warned could happen, as well as power outages as Ophelia moves up the coast.
As long as we just stay cool, calm, and collected, the storm will respect it.
Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
And you can put the Weather Authority Storm Center in your hands. Download the free WBFF Weather Authority app for your smartphone. Use our Doppler radar to follow this weekend's storm right down to your street. Just go to your app store and search for WBFF to get started. More voices are putting Maryland's juvenile crime crisis into perspective. Fox 45 has been covering the juvenile crime problem for months as parents, police, and prosecutors across the state continue to call for change to the current juvenile laws. And as violence among young people spikes across the state, a lot of it is playing out near or sometimes even inside schools. With school back in session, we spoke with Baltimore City School Police Sergeant Clyde Boatwright about why this is happening. Fox 45's Maxine Stryker has more.
As the school year is back in full swing,
our schools are a reflection of our communities.
Violence among young people statewide is of top concern.
What's going on in the communities will ultimately impact our schools.
And that's become evident in just the first few weeks of the school year as violence has touched schools across our region. It was just 2 weeks ago a gun was found on an 8th grader at Cherry Hill Elementary Middle School, temporarily placing the school on lockdown.
I don't even understand in an elementary school, how do these things even happen?
And in Howard County this week, police charged a 17-year-old student after they say he brought this handgun to Oakland Mills High School.
Right now, we're now seeing our young people throughout the state carry firearms on a regular basis. It's almost the equivalent of how people used to carry pocket knives. Now, people just arm themselves and decide that they want to, in some cases use it for, robberies. They're using it for carjackings. They're using it for shootings.
Baltimore City Schools Police Sergeant Clyde Boatwright says guns are simply too available to young people. Last year, at least a dozen were found in Baltimore City Schools alone.
Traditionally, we've seen that those guns are not being used at the school on another student.
A 12-year-old boy was shot near Dunbar High School's football stadium during a recent Friday night football game, sending spectators scrambling for cover as players ran off the field in fear.
It's not normal, but sadly, it's the reality of the challenges of inner city.
At that same school Monday, a cafeteria window was hit by gunfire after school, and 2 juveniles were taken into custody. As the calls for change grow louder from parents, police, and prosecutors, legislators have yet to take action to address the juvenile crime crisis. And Boatwright says they can't afford to wait much longer.
I think that they need consequences, and if we can address those and give consequences for these poor decisions, then maybe those young people who are on the fence about whether or not they should make bad decisions will see that they will be held accountable.
And schools can be the safe haven they're meant to be.
We are ready to, be called to action in a minute's notice. So, but we pray and hope that, we have a successful school year.
Maxine Stryker, Fox 45 News.
Baltimore County also seeing problems when it comes to juvenile violence in and around schools. Just last week, police placed two 14-year-olds in the custody of DJS following a shooting near several Baltimore County public schools that prompted a lockout. Baltimore County police have confirmed the gun allegedly involved in that shooting was a Polymer 80 ghost gun. While the victim is not actively enrolled in Baltimore County public schools, the two other juveniles allegedly involved are current students. A dozen top prosecutors across Maryland are also calling for changes to the juvenile justice system. Now, they represent about 5 million people. That's about 82% of the state's population.
If we don't do something to hold these young people accountable, they will continue to run and almost have lawlessness in our cities. And we can't have that.
Some of our laws that have been passed recently do make it a little more challenging for us to hold them accountable. And that's sort of playing a role in some of the issues we're seeing at the moment.
To our young people, you are not outsmarting the police. You are not outmaneuvering prosecutors. You will not scare your peers into silence.
And we're not just hearing from prosecutors, we're also hearing from police. Coming up at 10:30, a local sheriff is calling on the governor to take action on the juvenile crime crisis. So how do your deputies effectively do their job to protect and serve when it's the juvenile offenders who have the protection from the laws?
That's a good question.
Coming up, Scott Thuman sits down with Republican presidential hopeful Asa Hutchinson in this week's campaign conversations. And later, as juvenile crime continues to rise in Baltimore, Fox 45 is holding your elected leaders accountable. We question the mayor on what he thinks the solution is. But next, newly obtained documents reveal more test struggles in Baltimore City. We're breaking down Project Baltimore's latest report. A new Project Baltimore investigation shows an alarming number of high school students in Baltimore City are failing grade level math. Now the investigation looks at results from tests given back in the spring. As Taylor Stewart explains, the latest round of results are kind of similar to results posted 5 years ago.
We spoke with a community activist who says the findings revealed by Project Baltimore's study are concerning. But what's most concerning is that they really haven't changed since 2017. Project Baltimore digging into new test results from Baltimore City high schools. The state math exam given last spring paints a bleak picture of how much learning takes place inside city classrooms and where students will be prepared to go next.
The type of fields that are emerging all have to deal with math. You look at the amount of high schools that are on that list, and then you take a deeper dive to see how many of those schools offer vocational and technical training.
Of the 32 high schools included in the investigation, 13 had 0 students test proficient in math, which boils down to 40% of all Baltimore City high school students, where not a single student who took the state test is doing math at grade level.
When you look at the education scores, they didn't happen overnight.
In a previous investigation 6 years ago, Project Baltimore found 13 city schools where 0 students tested scored proficient in math. That was 2017. 6 schools are back on the list once again. Pastor Shannon Wright says that does not support the claim from many city and school leaders that city schools are making slow but steady progress.
There have been several administrations that have watched the decline of education in Baltimore City. So when we talk about leadership, it is not just Dr. Santelises. It is the mayor, it is city council, but they can call for accountability on how the money is being allocated, how much of that money actually makes it into the classroom.
And if it does, why isn't it making a difference?
There's so much more below the surface that we're not seeing. And we're seeing that in no heat in the winter, no air conditioning when it's hot. We're seeing that in physical buildings that have leaks, that have rodents, that have all sorts of things that make it impossible for students to learn.
Taylor Stewart, Fox 45 News.
And we're continuing to see the fallout from the latest Project Baltimore report. Last school year, Baltimore City received $1.6 billion from taxpayers. That's the most ever. The school also got $799 million in COVID relief funding. The troubling test scores has mayoral candidate Sheila Dixon demanding accountability when it comes to where that money is going.
Where is the breakdown, and why isn't the school board responding to many of these questions as relates to the budget, the money, and why can't the school system be transparent in providing the citizens? You know, I feel for parents. My kids are grown, they're out of school. But I, as a former teacher, I'm always committed to education. I know it's the important, it's the answer, one of the answers and the key that we're facing now with our juveniles and what's happening with crime, what's happening with the breakdown in the family. Parents, guardians, supporters need to be outraged. They need to be at North Avenue demanding answers to what's happening with their students and with their children. And I don't see that happening.
And Project Baltimore has been investigating the problems within the Maryland public schools, including Baltimore City test scores and Howard County's bus problems. You can find all their reporting on our website, foxbaltimore.com. An investigation is underway in Dundalk after Baltimore County Police say a man was found shot. Police say it happened just after noon on Everton Boulevard. When police arrived, they say they found the man who had been shot, quote, at least once. Police did perform life-saving efforts on that man. It's unclear tonight what his condition is. Fox 45 News will continue to bring you the latest as we learn more. Coming up on Fox 45 News at 10, one local sheriff says his hands are tied when it comes to holding juveniles accountable. What we're learning about the juvenile crime crisis in Carroll County.
He's running for the White House and says he won't let Donald Trump get in the way. Trump said in a June town hall, "This guy, nobody knows who the hell he is." What do you make of that?
Well, I think we're getting under his skin.
Our campaign conversation with Asa Hutchinson coming up.
Well, he's done it all from impeaching a president to prosecuting terrorists and running a state. Now he wants to run the country. So how can Asa Hutchinson turn that into a reality? Sinclair's chief political correspondent, Scott Thuman, sat down with the former Arkansas governor in this week's campaign conversations.
This is, to me, the most prestigious, iconic building in America.
January 6th, when you watched what was happening here, what went through your head?
This should never happen in America.
Asa Hutchinson says the next day, when Donald Trump announced he wouldn't attend Biden's swearing in, he had an announcement to make too.
And that's when you knew you needed to run.
Yes.
Trump said in a June town hall, this guy, nobody knows who the hell he is. You know who he's talking about?
Well, yeah. Ada. I don't know who Ada is, but I think that's who he's talking about.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think we're getting under his skin.
At that debate in Milwaukee, it appeared you were the only candidate not to raise your hand when asked if you would support former President Trump if he became the nominee.
Well, and they added if he was a convicted felon, too. There is a fear factor of Donald Trump in the party, but I went after terrorists, and I'm not going to be discouraged from making my case against Donald Trump.
He's not exaggerating. The former prosecutor named U.S. Attorney by Ronald Reagan was just 31 at the time, the youngest in the country. And yes, he has confronted terror head on.
In 1982, you had to put down the pen as a prosecutor, as a U.S. attorney, and put on a bulletproof vest when negotiating with a white supremacist cult leader.
That's correct.
Are you a tough guy and we just didn't all know this already?
Well, I think there's a side of me that is courage and determination that some people underestimate. I did my duty, and I helped negotiate a peaceful surrender, and then I prosecuted him and put him in prison, and that is who I am.
Hutchinson later became head of the Drug Enforcement Administration, second in command at Homeland Security, and two-term governor of his home state, Arkansas. Oh, and before that, he went up against one of his predecessors while in Congress.
One of your places in history is as House manager during President Bill Clinton's impeachment. Do you think we throw around the threat of impeachment too much these days?
Yes, absolutely. You know, whenever I engaged in that impeachment trial, that had not happened in over 100 years in our country. But since then, I think it is used as a tool to, wave a red flag of aggression whenever there's policy disagreements.
We've seen Vivek Ramaswamy play tennis. We've seen RFK Jr. working out. Is this correct? Your morning hotel room routine is 100 jumping jacks, 50 sit-ups, and 20 push-ups.
That's correct. I usually try to add a number of other weightlifting exercises in there as well.
All right, lightning round, because we're going to wrap up here. Finish the border wall or not?
Yes.
Is President Biden too old for a second term?
I actually think he is not in good enough health for a second term.
Term limits for members of Congress?
Yes.
Lifetime appointment for Supreme Court justices?
Yes.
Do you keep funding Ukraine?
Yes, you do.
Are you binge watching anything right now?
As much as I can. It's Yellowstone and the prequel and the sequel to the prequel.
What is your guilty pleasure?
Well, it'd be Oreos and milk.
Doesn't get much more American than that.
It's good. Try it.
Oh, I have. It is good. Governor, thank you.
Coming up, as the juvenile crime crisis surges, we're holding your elected leaders accountable. Fox 45 News presses Mayor Scott on solutions. And next, the Carroll County Sheriff is weighing in and asking the governor to do more about juvenile crime.
I'm Wyatt Everhart. Ophelia making her presence felt up and down the East Coast. How much longer will you have to deal with the rain and still some of the wind from what is now a tropical depression? We'll look at that the rest of the weekend and the week ahead, all coming up on Fox 45 News at 10.
listen to what we have to say, because we're on the front lines. And if you can't listen to the people that are doing this day in and day out, who are you going to listen to?
As juvenile crime across the state continues to spike, a local sheriff is calling on the governor to do something and do it now before things get worse. I sat down with Carroll County Sheriff Jim DeWeese to hear what he has to say about the juvenile crime crisis.
And they take care of my deputies because...
Carroll County Sheriff Jim DeWeese almost at a loss for words when asked this question. So how do your deputies effectively do their job to protect and serve when it's the juvenile offenders who have the protection from the laws?
That's a good question.
A question he's pondered since the state's juvenile laws went into effect.
There's a lot of confusion when a juvenile commits a crime and we simply can't charge them and we have to release them back to a parent. We have to tell a victim, I'm sorry, you're going to have to pursue this another way, whether it's civilly or you're going to have to try and file something because our hands are tied.
Sheriff DeWeese says he tried to warn lawmakers of what was to come.
People that were on the front lines, like me, the sheriffs, the chiefs, the state's attorneys, we told them this is exactly what was going to happen.
Now he's hoping lawmakers in Annapolis, more importantly, Governor Wes Moore, will listen.
The governor, who is a smart man, that understands that this is a problem, needs to come up with solutions, but work with law enforcement to do this.
But the governor, although calling for accountability.
Some of the laws they're talking about adjusting are laws that were passed before I became the governor.
Doesn't seem to be offering any specific plans to tackle juvenile crime.
The adjustments to the laws that were passed by the legislature need to be adjusted by the legislature, but they know we are working very closely with them to make sure that the adjustments that need to be made are going to be made.
It is not performed or successfully completed.
While lawmakers can't seem to agree on what needs to be done and when. Sheriff, do you think the legislation should meet sooner rather than later to tackle this juvenile crime?
Absolutely.
Sheriff DeWeese says he knows what lies ahead.
If you don't work on this immediately and you say we're going to look at it in January and we're going to ask the governor to sign it in April, May, or June, and it's effective in July or maybe October, the wake of victims is going to be tremendous.
Those calls for change, Maryland House Speaker Adrian Jones and Senate President Bill Ferguson seem to be non-committed about changing the juvenile laws when Fox 45 News pressed them about it this week.
It feels like there's not a lot of urgency happening. Why is the General Assembly not moving quicker to get a handle on this before more people's lives are impacted by this?
Look, I push back to say that there's not urgency. It's something that I'm talking about with other members and my community every single day. It's probably the thing that keeps me up the most at night.
Should there be a special session to address the juvenile crime crisis right now?
This is something I will be discussing with my chairs. I don't want to be in the media and saying, oh, Speaker didn't talk to us. We're going to be having meetings.
And this isn't the first time Jones and Ferguson have balked when it comes to crime legislation. Governor Larry Hogan pushed two tough on crime bills for years, the Violent Firearm Offender Act and the Judicial Transparency Act. A watered-down version of the Transparency Act passed last year, but no version of the Violent Offender Act ever did. The bill passed in the Senate twice, but never made it through the House. It didn't make it out of the committee this year. The Senate president told Fox 45 News he would not bring it up again unless Jones and the House took action first. Critics also say lawmakers dragged their feet when it came to a bill backed by City State's Attorney Ivan Bates. The language of that bill, which raises the maximum penalty for someone who's 21 or older with an illegal gun, was rolled into another bill. It passed just 2 days before the end of the legislative session. One group of lawmakers met to talk about the juvenile crime crisis last week. They'll meet again in November. Political analyst John Deedy says state lawmakers need to take action to address the crime problem instead of just talking about it.
What the leadership is doing, and many times, is expressing a sense of urgency with rhetoric. The action is going to be, what are they going to do in January? And frankly, right now, I think they are not sure how to deal with this as far as what to do. The clock is ticking. By the time the session meets in January, they have to have a plan in place, and a plan that, the governor will definitely get behind. And frankly, I think the governor should be doing more leading on this.
Earlier this week, Fox 45 News sent questions to Senate President Ferguson and House Speaker Jones asking What legislative plans do you have to address the juvenile crime crisis? Why does it appear there is a lack of urgency to take action in this matter? How do you respond to community activists who claim the General Assembly has blood on its hands in regards to the juvenile crime? And why has the General Assembly to date ignored calls to change juvenile justice laws on the books? How do you respond to the people who say this threatens the safety of 6.1 million people here in this state? We asked for a response by Friday evening. We did not hear back. And as state lawmakers continue to put off addressing the juvenile crime crisis until January, we're pressing city leaders for answers. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost has the latest after questioning Mayor Brandon Scott about what he wants from leaders in Annapolis.
Mayor Scott says the entire juvenile justice system needs to be rebuilt top to bottom, and we pressed him multiple times on specifically what that means.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here today.
Immediate availability for Mayor Brandon Scott, giving us a brief chance to question the leader of Baltimore City on what he's asking lawmakers to do to help curb the surge of violent crime among juveniles, especially as kids are driving the car theft numbers through the roof in the city. What specifically are you looking for to the Baltimore City delegation or other lawmakers in Annapolis to make changes when session starts?
I'll say what I said before anybody else was talking about this issue, right? Long before folks in the media were thinking that the state had anything to do with public safety in Baltimore. I said that we need a completely new system built from the ground up. The old system that we had didn't work. The systems that we have now clearly need work. Every single aspect of it from the top to the bottom must be looked at.
Mayor Scott touching on the need for a more robust home monitoring system, which has been an issue. In April, a 12-year-old Jalen Richards was gunned down in South Baltimore.
He was on house arrest due to the streets that somebody destroyed my nephew to these streets. They still was dragging my baby to the streets because he was a minor.
And most recently, at least 2 people arrested in connection to the Brooklyn Homes mass shooting already wearing an ankle monitor, including 18-year-old Tristan Jackson, who was under the supervision after police say he brought a loaded handgun to Merville High School earlier this year when he was 17. Even after multiple attempts to get more details. But specifically, what are you looking for?
All of it. I'm looking for us to look at every single aspect of how we deal with young people when they are caught in the justice system. All of it has to be looking at every single aspect.
Does that mean you want to see those 2 laws repealed?
That means I want us to look at every single aspect of it, top to bottom, to build a system that works.
That's your last question, Mackenzie.
The mayor avoiding answering specifically what he's calling to change. Those 2 laws in question, the Juvenile Justice Reform Act and Juvenile Interrogation Act. The Reform Act prevents kids 13 and younger from facing certain nonviolent misdemeanors, and the Interrogation Act limits when police can question a minor without getting permission from a parent or an attorney. And the law is at the center of the debate as the conversation swirls about how to hold young kids accountable for their crimes. Police and prosecutors from Maryland argue the laws hinder the justice ability, while juvenile crime numbers continue to climb. And while the mayor talks about revisiting the home monitoring situation, it's unclear what other aspects or areas of the juvenile justice system the mayor wants lawmakers to really tackle when session begins in January. In the newsroom, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Fox 45 is continuing to track tropical depression Ophelia as it moves through southeastern Virginia. Right now, you're taking a live look around our region with conditions in Ocean City, Towson, and right here in Baltimore. Looking pretty calm right now, so let's go ahead and check in with meteorologist Wyatt Everhart.
Hey, Vincent, great shot of the beach there, too. I mean, the Maryland beaches had some of the highest impacts so far. Large surf there and excessive high tides. But for Central Maryland, for Baltimore, for the Chesapeake, this has been a slow moving system with intermittent impacts. You know, gusty winds at times, then they lay back. We also had some heavy downpours at times. The heaviest rain right now is still well south of us, the core of now tropical depression Ophelia, which was downgraded just a little earlier this evening from tropical storm. Still tremendously heavy rains here from Richmond right up into Fredericksburg. And this is the type of rain we have to watch for as we go into the overnight and the early morning hours. Aerial flood watches out here for not just Virginia, but southern Maryland, right up into the Baltimore area. So any downpour that happens with the ground already so saturated, obviously that could create some flooding and some concerns in areas. And maybe as much as another pocket of up to 2 inches of rain before this is all done. We've got more rain due in overnight and then some early day tomorrow. I think steadily through the day tomorrow we see less and less rain. That'll be good as you head out for your Sunday afternoon plans, including, of course, the Ravens. Gusty winds today, peak gust 45. Southern Maryland, we had gusts down along the beaches that were in excess of 50 miles per hour. 64 now, BWI. Not a shabby wind there either. I mean, we're northeast 22, gusting to 30 still, so it is a windy night. Saturated trees and tree branches, still could have a few of those come down. A cool night, still some action further south in the tropics. This is Philippe, by the way, which is now a tropical storm, but we think this one stays to sea. Back here, all eyes on just, again, those remnants of what is left now of Ophelia. Still heavy rain, still some gusty winds to deal with. Low pressure will eventually move slowly out to sea tomorrow, allowing for some drier weather to begin to edge in. We can dry out the whole area Monday into Tuesday. However, I do think Tuesday, a bit of a mid-level disturbance coming through. We might see a few more showers around as we work toward that second day of the week. Now, the other big shift here, of course, have been the temperatures. I mean, just so much cooler out there today. Even when Ophelia clears, these numbers are not going to jump up very much. Tomorrow, struggling to get out of the 60s. I think it's the same story Monday and Tuesday. It'll take a while before we can push our way back into that 70-degree range, more seasonable numbers as we go into the latter part of the week. So to sum it up here, looking at the outlook here, you can see that the trend is going to be for cool temperatures, still rain tomorrow, especially that first half of the day. But as we work our way into Monday afternoon, partial clearing, better clearing midweek, finally back into the 70s as we work our way toward the end of next week. So if you're not a super cool weather fan, a lot of us are, some of us aren't, we get a little bit of both, kind of a half and half 7-day forecast here. We'll look more at some of those Ophelia impacts coming up a little later in the news. We'll head back to you.
All right, Wyatt, thank you. You're taking a live look over the Inner Harbor as we continue to see some off and on showers. Wyatt Everhart is on standby with a look at your weekend forecast.